everyone. This is Kit Cabell with Hard Lens Media, and this is Perspectives. So, corporate media, they're stuck in their own bubble, and they're trying to really sell Joe Biden as this leftist and someone who can unite progressives and independents and moderates and Republicans, and we're all going to beat Trump. And there's going to be trumpets and rainbows all over the place. Everyone's going to be dancing. Boy, oh boy, I had high hopes for this primary, and I was wrong. You know, the last time I have hope for a primary. And Joe Biden and his campaign are struggling right now because he's an extremely flawed candidate. And corporate media, remember, they ran with that narrative that everyone was going to fall in line with Joe Biden. And who knows? Maybe they're right. Maybe there's enough people out there that hate Donald Trump and Joe Biden wins. It's 50-50 at this point. Maybe Joe Biden wins or Donald Trump wins. We have two crazy old men running for the highest office of the land. Both are unqualified, and these are the choices we are stuck with. And we deserve so much better. But yet corporate media wants to run with this narrative. So check this video clip out. These 3 video clips from Case Study QB. Huge shout out to him. I don't know how you're sitting through all this corporate propaganda, but hey, you're doing us all a favor by giving these snippets of corporate media and sharing them online on social media. Follow Case Study QB on Twitter. So with that being said, let's play this first clip out because, yeah, if I have to sit through it, you guys got to sit through it too.
This pandemic has completely altered the presidential race, fair to say, from the coverage of the primary to when and how it actually ended. It's also exposed Donald Trump for his weaknesses, which were already quite apparent before, but even sharper relief now. And that's why his polling average and the Real Clear Politics average is at its worst position in a while. After this very long, hotly contested Democratic primary, there's now a tremendous amount of unity on the Democratic side, I think it's fair to say. Joe Biden's campaign is creating joint policy task forces with Bernie Sanders people. And as Matt Iglesias writes in Vox, though Biden did not run an aggressively ideological primary campaign, the substance of his proposed agenda on everything from housing to education to minimum wage to climate change is, quote, arguably the most progressive policy platform of any Democratic nominee in history. Joining me now, the author of that piece, Matt Iglesias, senior correspondent at Vox. Matt, I like the piece. You had been one of the Vox people who had sort of made the case for Sanders early in the primary when different authors were doing that. Your piece here is sort of on the substance of just what's in the platform. Why do you say that it is possibly the most progressive agenda of a Democratic nominee that has happened so far?
Joe Biden is a Democratic Party lifer. He's a very mainstream Democrat. He's been there for a lot of years. A lot of that sort of old history came up during the primary. But the evolution of the Democratic Party has been in a much more progressive direction over the past 5, 10, 20 years. And I think that's really reflected in this platform here. I mean, a small thing is Biden is for the $15 an hour minimum wage, right? We didn't talk about that a lot during the primary because the candidates all agreed. But as recently as 2016, that was a very divisive issue. That was something Hillary and Bernie Sanders argued about an enormous amount. And now it's like you didn't hear it because it's the consensus. But it's the consensus that actually drives what might happen in policy terms. And so you look at down the road, he's talking about doubling Pell Grants, tripling housing assistance, big increases in federal funding for low-income schools, as well as this really actually quite ambitious climate policy agenda. And it's not that Joe Biden is the most hardcore leftist in Democratic Party politics.
So I just want to address something in the video. The Democrats are not united. And I don't want to hear this crap about, Joe Biden won all the Super Tuesdays. He won South Carolina. He was great. No. No one's talking about the fact that there was election fraud, that there was voter suppression, that there was closing of polling stations, that progressives and independents were mocked by Joe Biden's campaign, especially in the early parts of the primary. And let's not forget that Joe Biden was telling somebody, like, if you don't like me, vote for somebody else. He said that a lot throughout the entire primary, and even now during this campaign. Yeah, the Democrats are not united. And I don't want to hear this crap about, well, what about Bernie Sanders' task force, his wonderful task force with all the progressives in there. They don't have a seat at the table. You want to know who's advising Joe Biden? It's the corporatists. It's the neoliberal Democrats. It's Joe Biden's donors. That's who's helping out Joe Biden. Now, maybe, they beat Trump. Okay, great. But they're not going to listen to progressives. They're not going to listen to independents. They don't want to have change. They just want to return things back to normal. Return the soul back to America. And the Democrats wonder how we got Donald Trump in the first place. But it's an interesting sell. It was an interesting video clip that we saw. But it's not going to work. But again, maybe it does. But not for me. I'm voting third party. I can't in good conscience vote for somebody like Joe Biden. But hold on. There's still more. Check this video clip out.
But it's the party as a whole is a much more sort of uniformly progressive force than it was just even a few years ago.
I remember seeing an illustration once of where he was in the sort of ranking of Democratic senators. There's a DW nominated as the sort of political science score, and he was like always right in the middle of the Democratic caucus throughout his career, which is a kind of impressive achievement in its own way, right? It means you like understand exactly where the kind of middle consensus position is. I want to talk about the climate stuff, but the housing stuff caught my eye because we don't talk about housing policy a lot, but there's been a real sea change in how people talk about it. And the housing proposal, in terms of just the expansion of federal assistance in housing, is quite large, and I think will be quite necessary in the aftermath of the economic devastation caused by the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he wants to take the sort of rental assistance program that has existed for a long time. People call it Section 8 vouchers. But right now, there's only a limited pool of money that goes in there. And so when the need for rental assistance goes up, the actual supply of assistance stays limited. He wants to make it, they call it an entitlement structure, the same as Medicaid or Medicare. If you qualify for help, you'll be guaranteed to get the help. That would be a quadrupling of the number of people who get assistance using the 2019 data. If you look at the economic problems we're facing now, it would probably be even more. So that would be a huge help to, many millions of low-income families. Also a big sort of new automatic stabilizer into the economy, right? It would assure us that when people fall on hard times because of recessions or whatever else, they're not at risk of eviction. And this is an idea that it was really nowhere, but Matthew Desmond talked about in his great study of evictions. It had become sort of more mainstream in kind of policy wonk circles. Biden put it out right when the pandemic was starting to hit, so it never really coasted on the news cycle. But that would be a huge change in federal housing policy, and it's something you can do in one of these budget reconciliation bills. So it might really happen. It's not subject to filibuster.
Yeah, someone who came up in housing politics, my dad was a housing owner, enormous change. It sounds like a small change, enormous change. But finally, talk about.
Okay, so you all sat through that clip. But there's one thing that, there's a lot to take apart in that clip, but there's one thing that really stood out. Where, they talk about how Joe Biden is in the middle of the road. He's on the chart with all the other candidates. He was in the middle ground, the incredible middle ground that always gets things done. The pragmatic choice, the neoliberal choice, the centrist choice, the moderate choice, the wonderful middle road choice. How'd that work out in 2016? Oh, that's right. Hillary Clinton lost, okay? She lost because she was the pragmatic choice. She was the moderate choice. And it didn't work. And there's a good chance that Joe Biden's going to lose. Running a centrist candidate never works at this point. People want real change. And there's a lot of issues that we are dealing with. And it's really sad to see that this is the situation we are stuck with, this crisis that we have. And the very fact that, you have the reporters even talking about this, that, he's middle road choice, the good guy. I haven't seen it because Joe Biden has been mocking progressives and independents. Joe Biden has been mocking the fact that, we need Medicare for all, student debt forgiveness, addressing climate change. And he might have these great policies on paper, but that's it. They're on paper. Will they ever be implemented? No. But hold on. One more clip, I promise. Check this video clip out.
I mean, the climate agenda was impressive to me when I read it during the campaign. It was also, of the third of things he put out, I think one of the bigger things to roll out, and had a lot of good things about it as favorably compared with other folks. But now that it is the plan of the nominee, it is by far the largest climate agenda that has been proposed by a Democratic nominee, although we know how large the need is.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough area because the gap between what scientists say we need to do and what the political system
Yep.
makes possible is just gigantic. But Biden's agenda on climate is huge. This is like a really long plan. There's a lot of different moving parts to it. But like the big headline target is to be carbon neutral by 2050. There's a lot of money for research. There's a lot of money for specific areas. He kind of clashed with lefty environmental activists on a couple detail points about carbon capture and about the potential role of nuclear energy. But those don't really speak to the sort of core of the climate agenda. And if you're talking about putting a lot of money into clean energy, you're talking about real regulation on utilities, you're talking about taking care of some of the social justice, environmental justice angles, it's really all in there. And Biden became defined in the primary by what he didn't endorse, particularly Medicare for all. But there's an incredible amount of stuff in here. And again, it's because that's how Democratic Party thinking has evolved. The era of trying to reach a bipartisan deal around cap and trade is over. And so now you have this sort of much more partisan, much more progressive approach.
Yeah, and the big question becomes, right, two things. One, whether those old habits of the ways of doing politics would be to carry forward in office, and then, of course, whether you have enough Senate votes and whether you can get Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin to vote for them. But the substance right there, people should definitely take a look at Matt's piece, also at the Biden website, to go through what is actually being proposed. Matt Yglesias, thank you very much.
Largest climate change policy. Climate change. It's a real threat, and we really need to address it. But I don't believe Joe Biden. He was vice president to Barack Obama, and there was a certain issue in regards to a large pipeline. The Dakota Access Pipeline, fossil fuels, which cause, problems with our atmosphere and our environment. Yeah, I didn't hear anything from the Obama administration about stopping it until the last minute. And Joe Biden has been pretty close to fracking. And he's also told people that, especially throughout the primary, hey, if you don't like my policies, vote for somebody else. Okay, great. Because there's a lot of things we got to address about Joe Biden. Number one, he's not a friend to progressives. He's not a friend to independents. And he's not building a large coalition because Bernie Sanders' task force, that wonderful task force, like I said before, they're on the outside. They're not on the inside. And if they do somehow, magically, out of the blue, no pun intended, manage to advise Joe Biden, it'll be very minimal. Because the people who are going to have the final word with Joe Biden are going to be the corporatists. Joe Biden has a history of working with segregationists. Because remember, Joe Biden's been in the United States Senate and also vice president for quite some time. So he has a long political career, and he's been on the wrong side of history. He's worked with segregationists. He was against busing and desegregation. He voted in 2005 for the credit card bill, which basically made student debt what it is. He's never apologized for the crime bill. He's against the legalization of cannabis. He said numerous times right now, not once, not twice, but 3 times, that he's not for Medicare for all. And there's a thing called COBRA. Okay? Plus, he has not 1, but 8 accusations of sexual assault, abuse, and harassment towards him. This man is a flawed individual, and progressives and independents don't want to really rally around the guy. I mean, I'm hearing this vote blue no matter who narrative from diehard Biden supporters that, well, Joe Biden can boil a baby, or he can assault a younger member of my family, and I'd still vote for him. Gee, how very Trumpian of them. I don't want to associate with somebody like Joe Biden, because that person, Joe Biden, is somebody who represents everything I stand against. And I don't want to hear this narrative, oh, what if we hold his feet to the fire, progressives will win. The Democratic establishment is never going to listen to us. They've shown it. Joe Biden has mocked millennials. He said he has no empathy for them. You would expect that from Trump, but Joe Biden, the guy who's going to beat Trump, is saying the exact same things. Yeah, I just can't, at this point, understand why corporate media is running with this whole concept of, well, Joe Biden is this better choice and he's building a coalition. They're living in their own fantasy realm. But maybe, there's enough people out there to hate Donald Trump and Joe Biden gets elected and it's all over. But it's not over. Because how do you think we got Trump in the first place? It's because of neoliberal policies. It's because of these pragmatic centrist choices. We got Trump because people were tired of the system. We got Trump because, being in the middle of the ground, and returning our soul back and having things go back to normal, it's not working. And especially with this crisis of COVID-19, this economic depression, the ever-growing threat of climate change, real initiatives is going to need to be taken, not half measures. And that's what Joe Biden's campaign are going to offer, half measures. But corporate media was running with this narrative throughout the entire primary that, everyone's going to vote blue, everyone's going to rally around Joe Biden, and that's it. Pay attention to the town halls and the live streams that Joe Biden is doing, and it's quite clear that Joe Biden has some cognitive issues. There's something wrong with him. I mean, is anyone not paying attention? But I guess, hey, that's what happens when you live in your own little bubble, when you're in the ivory towers of corporate media, or you're part of the establishment Democratic left or whatever. It makes no sense. And, they can live in that fantasy world as much as they want, but I'm not seeing that coalition. And when you have somebody like Joe Biden who basically tells voters that, hey, if you, especially African-American voters, hey, if you're not going to vote for me, then you ain't black. Yeah, that's going to win people over. Oh, wait, Joe Biden's campaign is also having a hard time reaching out to Latinos. Okay, again, those are key demographic groups that you need to win an election. And not to mention, he spit in the face of progressives and independents and millennials. I mean, who's going to vote for Joe Biden? I don't know. Maybe there's enough turnout and it happens. Maybe people hate Trump. I keep saying this. But you know what? There is also a good chance that Trump wins this re-election because there is a whole treasure trove of videos that Trump and his campaign can use against Joe Biden. And there's nothing anyone on corporate media or Joe Biden's campaign or establishment Democrats can say that can save Joe Biden. Joe Biden is his own worst enemy, and everyone's just ignoring it. Great. Well, job well done, corporate media. That's why independent media exists. And let's face it, the debates are going to be interesting. We will be covering them. We will be talking about them. And they're going to be a disaster. But hey, someone's got to talk about it, so we can never go through this again. So what's the solution? We must get involved. We must demand to have election integrity. We got to get money out of politics. We must call for a national strike. And more importantly, we should call for the demand and need for real third parties. We should have true direct democracy and a parliamentary system, because the two-party neoliberal choice of Democrats and Republicans, it's not working. We got to fight for a better future. This is Kit Hard Lens Media. This is Perspectives. Peace, everyone.